Welcome to the podcast from HeadHunters Northwest. HeadHunters Northwest. Specialized recruiting, specialized approach, where we take you behind the scenes into our customers' businesses. For over 20 years, HeadHunters Northwest has served the global defense, small arms, and shooting sectors worldwide. Listen in as we discuss the inner workings of our USA and international customers. HeadHunters Northwest, finding you the best heads for business.
Okay, welcome back to HeadHunters Northwest podcast. This is part 2 with Trent Marsh. If you missed it, you should definitely listen to part 1. We're going to go into talking about the millennial leadership in a brand and then also move into some media discussions. So tell me a little bit about when your article with what you were writing. Let's talk about the millennial leadership and how this is affecting the brands and the marketing piece.
Well, it's been a slow walk anyway. Obviously, you could speak to it too of what the role of employee and employer have changed a lot in the last 20 years, especially the way the marketplace of employment has changed. I'm really kind of the first generation that pensions aren't even it doesn't matter. You're not even trying to find a job that has a pension anymore because they don't exist. And benefits in general are often not what they used to be. Remote work wasn't a thing anybody really thought of, even as recently as me coming out of school 20 years ago. And now I can't imagine going back into somebody's building. I'm a feral cat at this point. I've been out on these streets for too long. I don't think you'd want me back in the building. So it's not just the millennial change. It's that millennials just happen to be the generation that have kind of come along for the ride in the way that so much of this has changed. But at the same time, the reality of doing the job has changed at the same time. So I was curious from you. It's why I wanted to get your opinion of what, as you're starting to see the positions that you're filling, obviously, you can't hire people that don't work anymore. And as people are starting to age out and you're having to look at you're making that transition to placing millennials, I wanted to get you, and that's why I quoted you in the article talking about it as well, of what that looks like from your side of the equation.
It's very different than it was 20 years ago. There's no doubt. It's very different than it was 5 years ago. I mean, I know we've got that COVID quirky thing in there, but it does not just COVID. It is a different idea of what does work look like. In my generation and me personally, I live to work. That's what makes me happy. It's what fills my soul. But that is not the case with most millennials. They only work to live, and they want to understand why they're doing something. They're not trying to be argumentative. They want more information. They believe they should be a part of the strategic leadership decisions from day one. And that's very different than the way the older generation believes you earn it. The younger generation tends to think they come with that already. And, you're talking about remote, right? These people they don't want to drive very far. So it's really interesting. I just recently was working on a job and it's so interesting. The director is driving an hour to and from work every day. The analyst does not want to consider the new job because they would have to drive 45 minutes. Now, they're driving from the same part of town to the same part of town, but to them, that is a deal breaker. They would never consider it. I mean, it's just, there's not a right or wrong. It's just shocking because you have to really not assume anything. I have learned I ask because you can't assume. What was normally acceptable to some people is not normally acceptable to others.
Okay.
And so it's very different.
It's I've seen positions where I'm like, wow, how are you doing that? I mean, I work remote. I've been completely remote since before COVID. I'm going on 7 years of remote positions. And I still see positions where I'm like, wow, I mean, if you're able to do that remote, that's great. And then on the flip side, there's ones that's like, why are you mandating this on site other than just
Yeah.
flat saying it needs to be on site? And it's, you know, I worked for a brand that was headquartered out of England for, when I was coming up in the industry. And, we had a US base of operations, but a lot of like my entire creative team was 7 time zones and an entire ocean away. So it was great practice for what ended up being my reality. I didn't realize that that's what it was at the time. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I'd point the thumb. You've known me for long enough to know that I've had a cantankerous phase where I think in truth, most of us would say that we had one, but
Yeah.
I think there is a certain amount of it's entitlement. I think it's fair to say entitlement. Some of it's generational. Some of it is baked into the way that education has been sold to a generation.
Yes. Oh, I agree wholeheartedly on that.
That's another 2-part podcast that we're not.
I know. Oh my gosh. Don't even get me started.
But that's a part of it. And then you've got the world has gotten smaller, and it's not that, you know, we all carry these around in our pocket now, and we assume that access to information is the same as knowledge, and that's not always the case.
Mhm.
But I also think it's fair to say that, a person of 25 years in 2026 has lived more life potentially in terms of exposures and thought processes than someone 50 years ago would have. That's just a reality of how small our world has gotten. It doesn't mean that they necessarily should have more weight, but just the exposure path of our reality has changed.
Yes, and also our expectations for hiring. So some of these companies, in my experience, they all think that people should work there a certain amount of time before they go on to the next job. But it's been one of my missions to educate hiring managers that that is not the way the world turns anymore. If someone is at a job 2 years and they move on to another job, it is more than likely because they feel like they have learned all they can learn and they want to move on and they want to learn something else. It's a very different way people do things. And yet you still have a lot of people that have this idea that it's job hopping. I think the advantage is that I have all of their resumes and I can point out to them their job history. So it sometimes is a matter of saying, now, wait a minute, you changed jobs here and here's why.
I was just having this conversation with a friend that doesn't work in the industry not that long ago that, coming out of graduating in college in 2006, I mean, you were flat told it doesn't matter if you don't like that job, you better stay there for at least 3 years. If you get pegged as someone that bounces around from job to job, good luck to you. And I feel like that stigma is almost entirely gone
I don't think it's gone. It should be. I mean, I think it should be gone, but I think that too, we don't have the same jobs we used to have. The jobs we're doing now are all software based. I mean, if you are part of Mike Rose thing where you're in dirty jobs and you're a plumber or tradesman, which is probably way more valuable than what you and I do, that's maybe a different story. But for jobs like that we're talking about in our industry, you're dealing with software and you're solving problems, and these executives are solving problems, and you don't learn how to solve different problems if you aren't going and learning about different problems to solve. So it just does not make sense to be somewhere an extended period of time because those people don't learn how to solve problems. And at the end of the day, that's why we all have a job, is to solve problems.
Well, and what part of that job hopping thing too goes back to another thing that was kind of mentioned. You brought it up, but millennials often want to know why.
Yes.
And I have often been accused of being the squeaky wheel, and frankly, I'll point the thumb. I absolutely will be. but it's not. I get pegged as being anti-process, and it's absolutely the opposite. I've had a nickname at one of the places where I work. They called me the homogenizer because I categorically refuse to allow things to just exist in the ether and not within our process. But too often we become slaves to the process. Well, this is the way we've always done it. Well, that just tells me that you've never taken a critical look at how it's being done. And I'm not asking why don't we do it this way to be difficult, but things, especially in the last 10 years, 15 years, social media. I graduated college in 2006, and social media was about one paragraph on page 87 of like it wasn't a thing yet.
Yeah.
You started .edu to get Facebook. There was no Twitter. There was no Instagram. And now we can argue again in another 2-part podcast about the importance that's put on social media as a marketing tool, but it's absolutely a piece of pie. And you've got people that are still existing within a process that doesn't account for some of these things. And you've got younger employees that are saying, what I'm being asked to do here, the way I'm being asked to think isn't just not the way I would do it. It is in direct conflict with my understanding of my reality.
Right.
Why are we doing it this way? When it's in this heavy a conflict with everything that I see on a day-to-day basis. So there's that.
But then the millennials bring it to let's use the word supervisor. It could be the owner of the company. It could be their hiring manager. And they're hired for this job in marketing. They're using AI, which these people have finally gone, oh yeah, it's not going to go away like a computer is not going to go away. And they say, okay, here, you need to do this. Here's what we're going to get. Here's the result we'll have. And these owners or managers or whomever they are saying, no, we don't want to do that. So you have this push-pull and you're hiring them to be the professional, but you're not letting them be the professional. So how do we convince these people that are against the try it? How do we convince them that you have to let them be the professional and let them try it when they're terrified of losing everything they've worked for in their brand?
I come from, this is the legal disclaimer portion. Trent's not giving you employment advice, do as I say, not as I do type of thing.
Yeah.
I've always come from the I'd rather ask for forgiveness than permission.
That definitely is our legal disclaimer.
We'll
call Clay Cheshire and say, Clay, can we say this?
Yeah, exactly. If it's obviously within bounds, but too often, especially this industry can be so parochial. And rather than you're not even asking to change the entire campaign. You're not trying to rebrand it. You want to do let's try a project like X. And even that gets shut down.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just better to do it anyway and have it. And if it falls flat, then own it. I mean, I think if there's a problem writ large with marketing in this industry is there's a lot of brands that are afraid to do marketing wrong, and that leads to bad marketing. If 20% of your marketing campaigns aren't falling absolutely flat, you're not even close to trying new enough things.
Right. Yeah, you have to fail. It's like being an entrepreneur. You have to fail many times before you succeed.
If your creative team doesn't have the freedom to fail, you are strangling them. And they might not be willing to tell you that because they have kids or a mortgage or a car. But at the end of the day, if your creative team doesn't come to work knowing I can try something kind of ticklish and it'll be okay even if it doesn't land, because you'll still learn something. You'll still learn something. And especially we talked in the first part about that push-pull of how do you serve your existing customer without forsaking your future customers? You have to track both.
And you probably need to have both on your team. That's the thing. And this is where I hate to even use this word, diversity. We need diversity, but we have diversity. In our industry, we have come a very, very long way. But people from outside our industry wouldn't see how far we've come because they don't understand where we were. But I do think that we need to keep doing that. And by diversity, I mean age ranges. I don't just mean male, female, or whatever ethnicity you think you're selling to this week. I think you've nailed it. It's like you have to sell to your current customer and your future customer without bankrupting your company.
And you can't just have them at the table and then not listen. There actually has to be the voices that you're entrusting the conversations to need to have agency to be able to try to affect that change.
Yeah.
Again, it doesn't mean you have to completely change everything you're doing, but you have to start stretching at some point. I quoted Roy Huntington. He said it just crystallized it so perfectly that he pegged it to the millennials, which is fine. I understand. I think Roy's perfectly content. Brent and Roy are happy to call themselves FUDs on their podcast. So I don't think Roy would take that as a slanderous statement at all. He put it to the millennials that they're so concerned with who their customer is going to be that they forget about who their customer is today. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. But I also think it's a little bit of an overreaction from some of our younger employees who would look at it and say the exact inverse. You're so worried about hitting next week's number that you are absolutely tanking 2035 because you can't see beyond the end of your nose for what's coming around the corner. Both things are true. Both things have to be spoken to. It's part of the genius you mentioned also in the last segment that I spoke to the Greshams, which who in the industry is more qualified to talk about exactly what we're talking about than Tom, who is an avatar of experienced elder statesman shooter, and Ryan, that is in the same boat as me, and just a few years ago was, who's this snot nose? Oh, that's Tom's kid walking around doing this, that, and the other thing. And we've had the ability to mature into that position of, yes, I started off in the industry as a punk kid, but I'm not a Nepo baby. I'm not doing this just because it wasn't somebody's uncle that I got my start at a company with. It's because I have ideas and they flesh. And you see Gun Talk, Tom still does the radio show.
Right. But it's evolved. It's evolved into a
podcast. Yeah. And then there's everything that they're doing with Armed Defender Television, like everything under that Gun Talk umbrella. It is just absolutely could be looked at by any company and say, how do we take this model, what this looks like in terms of serving all channels? I've said for years that the people who tell you that print is dying, and I've had it shouted at me since I started in the industry, are just as wrong as the people that say all you need to be doing is social media.
Right, I agree. Totally.
It's not just print and it's not just social media. Good marketing is omnidirectional because you don't know, especially these days, you don't know where those contacts are going to come from. Your only job is to take up oxygen in any room that your customer may find themselves. And that's definitely more difficult than it was 20, 30 years ago when we got 5 magazines we need to advertise in. There's 2 or 3 big radio shows and a couple television people that make sense. Go do it. I wish life were that easy today. And that's not even getting into the discussion about AI and what that may or may not mean for the future.
Well, what do you think it's going to mean for the future for marketing and media?
I think that initially there's a lot of panic and consternation over something that will never be as big of a deal as we want to make it said. Again, we go back to when I got started in this industry and, well, the internet's killing print. internet's killing bad print, mediocre
Yeah.
print.
Right.
You don't see good print going away. More than that, your best digital mastheads are what? Extensions of the best print mastheads. They're not
Yeah.
exclusively standalone digital. It's that the people that have always been good at storytelling find out where to go tell stories, and they do it. And it's the same with AI. It's the same with brands. It's the buzzword right now, right? Like it's the thing that everybody has to be doing. I use it for some stuff, but I don't use it to write articles for me. I use it to say, I don't like how this sounds. How could I change this wording? Okay.
Yeah.
It's a great red team. Like if you're a marketing company or you're a company of any size and you're small, which our industry has a lot of small business.
Yeah.
We're lucky to have a lot of small business entrepreneurs. The problem with that is your head count may be single digits.
Mhm.
And when you've got that many people wearing that many hats, you don't have time for ideation. You don't have time for that real critical strategic thinking to sit down and do that.
Yeah.
At its root, large language models are logic based. It's percentages and it's looking at what the most likely response to this, that, or the other thing is. Go argue with it. If you got a flaw in your logic, go argue with ChatGPT or
I remember you telling me that you had done that. This was a couple of years ago. I think that you sent that to me and you said, I know, arguing back and forth, and this is what it told me. And I thought, I don't know that anyone else would have thought to do that, but that is so perfectly you because you're going to challenge it.
Well, more than that, it challenges me. If it's logic and percentages based. If there is a inherent flaw in the way that an argument's presented, if if that flaw confirms your priors, you Shaylene aren't going to throw a flag on it because it's going to sit within your diagram of what it's supposed to look like. You can't do that with a large language model because it's got too many inputs that are going to say, no, by the numbers, this doesn't fly. So you better make a compelling argument for why and how it should look like X. That's task completion, fine. But we're already seeing where big brands, big companies are saying AI can do all this and they're firing people wholesale. And 6 months later, they've got job postings up again because they're realizing that it's not set it and forget it. That's not what AI is there for.
Yeah.
It's an you and I can only sit at a pottery wheel and use 2 hands. That's all we got.
Right.
Where the force multiplier effect for AI comes in isn't sitting down and writing a story about elk hunting because ChatGPT can't go on an elk hunt. ChatGPT has never picked up a double stack 2011 to decide whether to like this one or that one better. Brent Wheat has been saying that for a long time. Brent pushed back on me with AI for stuff, and now he's using it more than I am for a lot of the task management stuff.
Yeah.
But his point was always, if you can tell a story, that's the advantage. Listicles, who cares? Go to ChatGPT and they'll pump out the crap. They'll generate the churn. But even now we're seeing people say this is just AI slop garbage.
Yeah.
The folks
I do think it's very similar to when monster.com came out. Oh, recruiters aren't going to have a job. And, same thing was said with LinkedIn. And, LinkedIn is definitely my most powerful tool, one of them. And I use lots of tools. And I certainly use AI to help me package things better, do a better job with my grammar because I'm not a writer. There's lots of things that helps me with, but it can't replace the human touch. You can't replace people calling me when they need help, and maybe they're an executive and they realize that their, VP of sales just gave notice and it's a Friday. AI is not going to answer the telephone and work through the problem of here's where we want to go next. And here's the kind of person we want to choose. It doesn't work that way.
Not more than that. AI doesn't have a Rolodex of actual humans that it knows.
Yeah.
It certainly doesn't have the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon network that we have the advantage of.
Right.
I might not know somebody.
Yes.
If next week I need a sales professional, I can call you and exactly what you're saying. I just, the network element, the human element, the storytelling element, that's where AI can't replicate it. And that's where, if I'm going to critique my own generation and the way that a lot of folks are missing the point of all of this, is they're assuming that an extraordinary number of tasks can outperform the human touch.
Yeah.
And nothing in my 16 years in this industry has led me to believe that AIing a bunch of work rather than taking 4 days to go sit at a writer's conference and break bread and spend time with people isn't a better way for me to generate return. You're seeing, if I take my brand hat off and put my media hat on, I have never struggled more than I have in the last 18 months to get brands to answer I'm not calling an app, hey, I need 5 guns sent to me next week. I need these specs clarified. I need photos for support. Hey, can you talk to me about this in your category? And it's crickets. It's not.
Why do you think that is? Do you think no one exists at the company that knows how to answer your question?
I think that's part. I think the people that I'm asking the question don't know the answer. And so they don't want to be seen. They would rather be seen as the person that's too busy to answer emails than that answered and didn't have the answer. Someone brought up to me, another media person brought up to me that they've seen a change in the last 5 to 10 years, especially at one of the media events that one of the media outlets puts on. Used to just be the marketing person that show up. If I get invited to one of those, I'm going to go and I'm going to give my spiel and my talk, and I do so over the course of the year. They said increasingly now you have the marketing person that shows up who is usually not able to rent their own car to be there, but they have the right degree from the right place. So somebody hired them. And then they have to bring someone from the product team along, because after the fancy PowerPoint and after the $30,000 90-second video sizzle reel that runs through all this that the marketing person did, hey, how does that perform with XYZ? And then they look to their left and they let the product person answer, because the marketing person
doesn't know.
Isn't a user anymore, isn't of the industry, doesn't have the connections, maybe doesn't have an interest. And that's the big and that goes to the relationship. It's people. It's funny in marketing, especially because everyone's always perfectly content to say people buy from people when it comes to sales. I don't really love my sales manager. Yeah, but he's friends with Bill over at XYZ, so we can't get rid of him because he's got a great relationship. People still matter in sales. That's never applied to marketing. It matters every bit as much there, even if it's just on the media side. Sure.
Yeah.
The average consumer may not know who your marketing director is.
Right.
Do they read the magazine that the editor that they love, even though if they don't know the editor's name, do they read that magazine? And if your marketing director doesn't have a relationship with that editor and isn't answering those emails and isn't getting your product that value add editorial inclusion, maybe you're not even buying ads in the magazine.
Yeah.
Now it impacts your brand. And you can't see that on a monthly, a quarterly, a lot of times even an annual basis. That's the kind of brand degradation that takes a long time to show up and even longer to fix.
Yeah. No, I agree wholeheartedly with that. I think you're right. And that is, it's not that we're saying we don't want new people in the industry. It's that we want people who are genuinely interested in our products and want to learn. That's the difference. AI cannot fudge your way through for you. There's too much of this that you have to have a personal interest and get the right information. So just to close out our podcast, this has been so fun, Trent. I foresee we have other discussions in the future. There's so many things. I just really want to thank you. And is there anything that you want to leave us with? We've told us where we can find this article, but any final thoughts?
Happy to talk about it with anybody. Find me on LinkedIn or wherever else. If everybody sat through both two parts, good on you. I appreciate it.
That's awesome. We'll have the link for Trent's article and also his LinkedIn in the notes. Thank you, Trent. And this will be a wrap for the HeadHunters Northwest podcast. And this is a first, part 2. Thanks, Trent.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the HeadHunters Northwest podcast. Specialized recruiting, specialized approach. You can reach out at headhuntersnw.com or call 605-600-1709. Join us again next week as we look behind the curtain into the global defense, small arms, and shooting sectors. HeadHunters Northwest, finding you the best heads for business.